The guidelines for reopening allow the cinemas, theatres, multiplexes to open up with up to 50% of the seating capacity from 15th of October. The state and the Union Territory governments given flexibility to take a call on reopening schools and allowing gatherings above 100 people outside the containment zones after the 15th. Suspension of scheduled international passenger flights extended till 31st of October. The international cargo flights and passenger flights approved by the government will continue. The COVID RT-PCR testing facility now available at the New Delhi International Airport. India hits out at Pakistan in the Human Rights Commission in Geneva. India says Pakistan's attempt to spread falsehood against India will not change the truth. Pathetic state of affairs for journalists and human rights defenders in Pakistan is well known. Environment ministers of Delhi, Haryana, Punjab, Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh to meet today will discuss measures to tackle the problem of stubble burning, which causes severe pollution every year. Election Commission likely to issue the Gazette notification today regarding the upcoming Bihar Assembly election. The poll panel will also be holding press conference in Patna after its two-day visit to review the poll preparedness. India continues to witness a high daily rate of recovery from COVID-19. Several states and union territories report more recoveries than the new cases. The recovery rate at 83.33% with a total of 52.73 lakh people recovering so far. In sports news, Serena Williams and Victoria Azarenka crash out from the French Open. Rafael Nadal stays on course for 13th title in Paris. Stanislas Wawrinka too reached the round of 32. Hello and good morning. You're watching Doordarshan DD India with me, Nancy Kohli. Our top story: the Home Affairs Ministry has issued new guidelines for opening up of more activities in areas outside the containment zones. In these guidelines will come into effect from today. The process of reopening of activities has been further extended. Now, cinemas, theatres, multiplexes will be permitted to open from the 15th of this month with up to 50% of their seating capacity, for which an SOP will also be issued by the Information and Broadcasting Ministry. The business-to-business, that's B2B exhibitions will be permitted to open, for which SOP will also be issued by the Department of Commerce. Now, swimming pools being used for training of the sportspersons will be permitted to open. Entertainment parks and similar places will also be permitted to open. For the reopening of schools and coaching institutions, states and union territory governments have been given the flexibility to take a decision after the 15th in a graded manner. However, the higher education institutions only for research scholars and postgraduate students in science and technology stream requiring laboratory experimental works will be permitted to open from the 15th. The states and the union territory governments have also been given flexibility to permit social, academic, sports, entertainment, cultural, religious, political functions and other congregations beyond the limit of 100 persons outside the containment zones after the 15th. And in closed spaces, a maximum of 50% of the hall capacity will be allowed with a ceiling of 200 persons. Lockdown shall continue to be implemented strictly in the containment zones till the 31st of this month. There shall be no restriction on the interstate and the intrastate movement of persons and goods. No separate permission, approval or e-permit will be required for such movements. And as per the latest guidelines, all international arriving passengers can now avail on arrival COVID-19 testing facility at the airports across the country. On arrival, testing facility will help the passengers seeking exemption from institutional quarantine if tested negative. Earlier, only the passengers with further domestic connection were allowed to have the RT-PCR test done on the spot. Rest of the passengers were required to produce a COVID-19 negative report done 96 hours prior to boarding the flight. Remember, Delhi Airport has become the first airport in India to set up a COVID-19 testing facility at the International Airport Terminal 3 for the international arriving passengers. Meanwhile, the Delhi Airport has resumed flight operations at the T2 terminal from today. The airport has been operating flights from the T3 terminal only since 23rd of March, when the flight operations in India were curtailed drastically due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The resumption of operations at T2 will be with 96 air traffic movements, including arrival and departure, per day, and increase progressively up to 180 by the end of October. And the suspension of scheduled international passenger flights has been extended till 31st of October. The Director General of Civil Aviation, the DGCA, has said that the international scheduled commercial passenger flights from India will remain suspended until 31st of this month. However, the international cargo flights and passenger flights approved by the government will continue. The Civil Aviation Regulator also said that international scheduled flights may be allowed on selected routes on case-to-case basis. The DGCA circular also said the suspension does not affect the operation of international all cargo operations and flights specifically approved by it. Scheduled international passenger services have been suspended in India since 23rd of March due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Delhi High Court has announced to further extend the suspended functioning of the courts. Courts work till the 8th of October due to COVID-19 pandemic. However, 3 benches on rotational basis will continue the physical hearings, and remaining benches will continue through video conferencing. And shifting focus now to our next big story, while India has hit out at Pakistan at the UN Human Rights Commission in Geneva. Exercising its right of reply at the UNHRC, India's first secretary at the UN in Geneva, Pawan Bhare, said that incessant efforts on its part to malign India in all the international fora is not going to change the fact that hundreds of journalists and human rights defenders die each year in Pakistan.
Pakistan's India-focused agenda demonstrates its own hollowness when it comes to accountability and justice for oppressing those standing for their rights. The pathetic state of affairs for journalists and human rights defenders is well known when the deep state could make prominent journalists disappear in broad daylight at the heart of Pakistan. We are not baffled that Pakistan does well when it comes to inciting hatred against religious minorities and targeting our leadership with hate speeches. Its well-cherished and inherited culture of hatred makes it the perfect candidate for carrying forward the legacy of intolerance against anybody having modern views on human rights.
India also highlighted Pakistan's hate speeches against the Indian leadership and the situation of minorities in the country at the Human Rights Council.
Pakistan's India-focused agenda demonstrates its own hollowness when it comes to accountability and justice for oppressing those standing for their rights. The pathetic state of affairs for journalists and human rights defenders is well known when the deep state could make prominent journalists disappear in broad daylight at the heart of Pakistan. We only could imagine the fate of those journalists and human rights defenders in territories under its control. Silence is the apt word for them affected through enforced disappearances, murders, detentions, custodial deaths and torture in Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Sindh and Pakistan-occupied parts of Indian Union territories of Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh. We are not baffled that Pakistan does well when it comes to inciting hatred against religious minorities and targeting our leadership with hate speeches. Its well-cherished and inherited culture of hatred makes it the perfect candidate for carrying forward the legacy of intolerance against anybody having modern views on human rights.
And news now from back home. The environment ministers of Delhi, Haryana, Punjab, Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh will meet today to discuss and tackle the problem of stubble burning, which causes severe pollution every year. The virtual meeting will also be attended by the Environment Secretaries of Delhi and the 4 neighbouring states, along with the members of the pollution control boards and corporations like the NDMC and the DDA. The meeting will review the work done by the states in the last 2 years to handle the issue of crop residue burning. Despite a ban on stubble burning in Punjab and Haryana, farmers continue to defy it as there is a short window between harvesting of paddy and the sowing of wheat. And let's now move on, take a look at news from poll-bound Bihar. The election notification for 71 seats of Bihar Assembly is being issued today. Of these constituencies, 13 are reserved for scheduled castes, while 1 is reserved for scheduled tribe candidate. The districts which are going into polls in the first phase are Munger, Bhagalpur, Lakhisarai, Shekhpura, Bokama, Patna, Ara, Buxar, Mohania, Jehanabad, Aurangabad, Gaya, Nevada and Jamui. The polling on these seats will be held on the 28th of this month. Meanwhile, the Election Commission team who is in Bihar will visit Gaya to assess the poll preparedness in the 12 districts which are going under polls in the first phase. The team led by the Chief Election Commissioner Sunil Arora will take stock of law and order situation apart from discussions with political parties and the representatives of the public. The team will also be holding a press conference in Patna this evening before concluding their 3-day visit to Bihar. India has successfully test-fired Brahmos supersonic cruise missile with several indigenous features on Wednesday. The test firing of the missile was carried out by the DRDO from Balasore in Odisha. The Brahmos surface-to-surface supersonic cruise missile features indigenous booster and airframe section along with many other made-in-India subsystems. It is one more major step in enhancing the indigenous content. And Prime Minister Modi, Union Home Minister Amit Shah and Defence Minister Rajnath Singh have congratulated the scientists and engineers for the successful test flight of Brahmos surface-to-surface supersonic cruise missile. Congratulating the scientists and engineers, Prime Minister Modi said the Brahmos supersonic cruise missile has achieved yet another milestone with successful test launch showcasing enhanced operational capabilities and additional indigenous technologies. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh also congratulated all the personnel of the DRDO and Team Brahmos for the spectacular mission. The Defence Minister in a tweet said that the successful launch has paved the way for the serial production of the indigenous booster and other indigenous components of the powerful Brahmos weapon system, realizing Atmanirbhar Bharat pledge. Union Home Minister Amit Shah said India is extremely proud of the DRDO for successfully testing the indigenously developed extended-range Brahmos supersonic cruise missile. The Home Minister said this state-of-the-art weapon is a testimony of India's defence potential and Prime Minister Modi's resolve towards an Atmanirbhar Bharat. Union Education Minister Ramesh Pokhriyal Nishank will connect with students across the country through Twitter today and answer their questions related to the national education policy. These questions will be related to important reforms in the education policy and the implementation of the policy. Notably, after 34 years, a new education policy calls for radical changes in the education system. And since the announcement of the new education policy, the process of discussion on its implementation is going on and many webinars and virtual conferences have been organized. In view of this, the Union Education Minister will communicate with the students from all over the country today. The International Day of Older Persons is being observed today and it's observed on the 1st of October every year. It's a UN designated day to focus on the well-being and the special needs of the elderly people. The 2020 theme aims to present proposals for reducing the health disparities between older persons in the developed and developing countries so as to leave no one behind. Union Health Minister Dr. Harshvardhan took to Twitter urging people to remember the contributions of our elderly to society. He said, and I quote, "COVID-19 has impacted them disproportionately. It is our duty to pay special attention to their needs and ensure their physical and mental well-being." The World Health Organization has said Decade of Healthy Aging 2020 to 2030 is an opportunity to bring together governments, civil society, international agencies, professionals, academia, the media and the private sector for 10 years of concerted, catalytic and collaborative action to improve the lives of the older people. And let's now move on, take a look at the updates on COVID-19 from across the country. The recovery rate has reached 83.53%, while the case fatality rate has also dropped to 1.56%. 85,376 recoveries were recorded yesterday, taking the cumulative total of recovered patients to 52,73,201. With this, the recovery rate currently stands at 83.53%. India's three-pronged strategy of test, trace and treat is proving to be a success. The fatality rate has dropped to 1.56% with 98,678 deaths recorded so far. The number of active COVID-19 cases in India stands at 9,40,705, which is 14.9% of the total cases reported so far. Now, India has exceeded the 140 per day per million tests as advised by the WHO by more than 5 times. According to the Health Ministry, more than 15 lakh COVID-19 tests can be done every day. Countries' center-led strategies of enhanced infrastructure, aggressive and easily accessible countrywide testing have led to a surge in the daily testing capacities of the country. This has resulted in sustained low fatality rate, and with higher testing eventually, the positive rate has also fallen substantially. The center-led COVID-19 management strategies are focused on early detection through widespread, early and aggressive testing. According to the ICMR's latest data, 14,23,052 people have been tested in a single day on Wednesday. The total number of people tested so far stands at 7,56,19,781. And moving on now, taking a look at the updates on COVID-19 from across the world. The death toll across the world has surpassed the 10 lakh mark. As per the latest update, more than 10 lakh people have died worldwide due to COVID-19, while over 3.41 crore have been affected by COVID-19 worldwide. As many as 2.5 crore people have recovered from the virus so far. The US continues to top the global tally, being the worst hit country by the pandemic so far. The US has the highest number of cases with over 74.4 lakh infected and more than 2.11 lakh deaths due to COVID-19. In terms of death toll, Brazil stands second on the tally with over 1.43 lakh deaths. There are more than 48 lakh cases of COVID-19 in Brazil. Now, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said it's time for countries to start using money from their national COVID-19 recovery and response plans to help fund the WHO's global vaccine plan. The Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator Program and its COVAX facility has so far received $3 billion but needs another $35 billion. It aims to deliver 2 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines by the end of next year, 245 million treatments and 500 million tests. Guterres asserted at a high-level virtual UN event that a national vaccine effort in a handful of countries will not unlock the doors to the global economy and restore livelihoods. At the event, the WHO chief said 167 countries have already joined the COVAX global vaccine facility and called on all the countries to step up significantly in the next 3 months. And moving on now, the Federal Aviation Administration Chief Steve Dickson conducted a nearly 2-hour evaluation flight at the controls of a Boeing 737 MAX on Wednesday. This move is being seen as a milestone for the jet to win approval to resume flying after 2 fatal crashes. The flight was a key part of the US plane maker's long-delayed quest to persuade the FAA to lift a March 2019 grounding order. It was triggered by 737 MAX crashes in Ethiopia and Indonesia that killed 346 people within a 5-month period. Addressing a press conference, the FAA chief said the process is not yet complete and that he was not ready to give the jet a clean bill of health, with FAA review still ongoing. Now, New York City restaurants have reopened indoor dining at 25% capacity amid the tight safety measures. Owners are taking all the precautions, including changing masks every 15 to 20 minutes, washing hands every 15 to 20 minutes, and even the air conditioning is being done with new filters. Customers are quite enthralled to actually have an enjoyable meal with friends and family at restaurants. A plan to reopen indoor dining was initially scheduled for July, but had to be delayed due to COVID-19 concerns. Britain's Royal Mail unveiled 4 formerly red post boxes which have been painted black in a novel way of celebrating the Black History Month. The Royal Mail said it had selected 1 post box in each of the 4 constituent parts of the UK and had them painted black with gold trim at the top. They will remain that way for the whole of October, which is Black History Month. The Royal Mail is the latest in a list of institutions that have engaged with Britain's black heritage in recent months, jolted by the Black Lives Matter movement and by the toppling of the statue of a slave trader by protesters in Bristol in June. Moving on now to sports news, 12-time champion Rafael Nadal eased into round 3 of the French Open by thrashing American Mackenzie McDonald with a 6-1, 6-0, 6-3 win. Stanislas Wawrinka saw off Germany's Dominik Koepfer 6-3, 6-2, 3-6, 6-1 to advance to the 3rd round of the French Open. The 16th seed Swiss suffered his only service break in the 3rd set, which he went on to lose, and broke his opponent's serve 5 times during the match to complete the victory in 2 hours and 8 minutes. Serena Williams' search for a record-equaling 24th Grand Slam title will extend into another year after an Achilles tendon injury forced her to withdraw from the French Open on Wednesday. Serena was about to play against Bulgarian Svetlana Pironkova in the 2nd round later, but after a warm-up decided the injury was too severe. Williams, a 3-time former champion at Roland Garros, said she may not play again this year. Ten-seed Victoria Azarenka suffered a shock straight set defeat by world number 161 Anna Carolina in the French Open 2nd round. The Belarusian reached the US Open final earlier this month but struggled on the clay against Slovak, who won 6-2, 6-2. Manchester United defeat Brighton 3-0 in the final 16 to reach in the quarterfinals of the EFL Cup. Scott McTominay scored for Man U in 44th minute, while Juan Mata scored in 73rd and Paul Pogba scored in the 80th minute. In another match of the EFL, Manchester City have made it to quarterfinals of the EFL Cup. Man City beat Burnley 3-0 in the final 16 thanks to a brilliant game from their star player Raheem Sterling. Sterling scored 2 goals in the 35th and the 49th minutes of the game, while third goal was scored by Ferran Torres in the 65th minute. Everton have secured their place in the final 8 of the EFL Cup. Everton won the match against West Ham with 4-1. Dominic Calvert-Lewin scored 3 goals for Everton in 11th, 78th and 84th minutes of the match, and another goal was scored by Richarlison in the 58th minute. Snodgrass scored the only goal for West Ham in 46th minute. And news now from back home. To mark the completion of 1 crore kilometer run targeted by the CRPF between 15th of August to 2nd of October, under the Fit India Freedom Run, an event was organized by the CRPF headquarters in New Delhi this morning. The first ever athlete to receive an Arjuna Award in 1961, Shri G.S. Randhawa, Padma Shri Commandant CRPF, flagged off the run. The head of the force, Dr. A.P. Maheshwari, DGCRPF was also present at the event along with other force personnel and appreciated the efforts of the team.
प्रधानमंत्री जी के मार्गदर्शन में स्पोर्ट्स मिनिस्ट्री ने एक अभियान चलाया 15 अगस्त से 2 अक्टूबर तक फिट इंडिया फ्रीडम रन। हमने 1 करोड़ किलोमीटर का लक्ष्य दिया था और मुझे खुशी है कि अभी तक हम लोग 1 करोड़ 40 लाख किलोमीटर का लक्ष्य प्राप्त कर चुके हैं।
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of the news. Thanks for being with us.